Welcome, everybody, to the INVESTTHIS Podcast 2.0, Wealth Mindset, where we dive into the minds of the successful real estate entrepreneur to uncover the tips and tricks that have allowed them to keep moving forward. I am your host, Scott Bauer, and I'm excited that you're here with us. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the INVESTTHIS Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bauer, and I'm excited to have our guest on here today because we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Not something that you're going to want to miss, I should say. So Brian Miller here with us. He's actually in China right now. He's the CEO of Easy China Warehouse, which is a third-party logistics company, and they're based out of China. I know, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and give you the mic. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit more about your background, kind of how you got to China, and what Easy China Warehouse is.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So I'm a native of Connecticut. I was originally born and raised there. And after I graduated university in 2008, which was kind of the last crisis that we had, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so the jobs weren't good either at the time. And I started traveling around the world. And to put it shortly, I basically ended up in Asia and eventually China. And I started working in manufacturing in China, and learning how, things are built and things are made and things are, distributed around the world. And eventually I started my own e-commerce company selling Bluetooth speakers, which I still own today. And during that time, I found, for me and a lot of my friends in e-commerce, how hard it was to distribute our products around the world. And that's how I created the company that I have now, which is Easy China Warehouse. And we basically help companies that make products in China take it from the warehouse and either distribute it to a local third-party warehouse or send it directly to their customers. So we help e-commerce companies facilitate the distribution of their products around the world.
So it's very interesting to me because I'm sure there's lots of hoops that you have to jump through when you're trying to distribute worldwide. And I don't know a whole lot about that side of things. I happen to have a background in the logistics side. So I know how logistics work, but I don't know what hoops you necessarily have to jump through when trying to transfer product from country to country and from continent to continent. I'm sure there's a lot of things you have to deal with. So can you just really quickly touch on like what that might be, what a company might use it for?
Yes, sure. We do like kind of two main things for companies. One is to ship direct from China to the end consumer. So if you have a customer, let's say in a random country in Europe, let's say Spain, and you don't have like a full-fledged fulfillment facility in Spain because your customer base is too small there, we can, after you get an order, we can take your product from China and ship it directly from China to that customer in Spain. So it's kind of direct from China fulfillment. Okay, that's the first thing we do. And then the second thing we do is we help e-commerce companies that sell through Amazon. So a lot of people don't know that you can be a third-party seller on Amazon and you can actually store your products in Amazon's warehouse. People don't know that actually a lot of times they're buying from someone else, not Amazon. Yeah. And so we help those people consolidate their shipments into containers in China and then label everything properly for shipment into an Amazon warehouse where then Amazon will fulfill to the end customer when there's a purchase. So those are kind of like basically the two main parts of our business.
Now, and I think we'll probably get into this a little bit deeper, but with the administration that we have here in the U.S. right now, has it made that more complicated or has it made it easier to do e-commerce business out of China?
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, if you can start way before the coronavirus when we started to have a trade war. So, some of the listeners might be familiar with it where, the U.S. had a gripe with the trade practices that the Chinese had, according to the World Trade Organization. Just to put it simply, there's certain, rules that they need to abide by. And there's other things in addition, but the basic gripe is that they're not following those rules. And so we've seen an escalation in tariffs on both sides over the past 2 years. And this has definitely made China less appealing in terms of purchasing. So there has been some production that has moved to other low-cost countries, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Malaysia, etc. And also, I think the tensions have grown through that time. And I think throughout the coronavirus, we've also seen increased tensions as well. And so this is definitely going to hurt the ability of people to do business between each other. Will it stop us buying from China? Probably not, I'd say, just because China's supply chain is so strong.
Sure. Yeah.
And people don't realize that, to build a product, you need many basically layers of supply. So all the components need to be put together and then made as a full component. And China still is superior in the world for that supply chain. But if tensions were to rise further, then you could see more manufacturing leaving China. It is definitely a possibility.
Well, let's just go ahead and hit this right on the nose right off the bat here in the beginning of the show and talk about the coronavirus. Obviously, you are an American from Connecticut. You're living in China right now amid this global pandemic that we are all going through. So why don't we take like 5 minutes? Give me your take on it. I mean, what do you think about what's going on? Does it make it complicated to live there as an American? Do you feel, is there any sort of complication with that? And then talk about what you know or what you see and what you're experiencing over in China with the coronavirus.
Yeah, sure. So just quickly, we first heard about it kind of in December, and it was formally announced by the government at the end of December. Now, we had the greatest ramp up in cases starting January, like through the end of January and into February in China. China took relatively extreme measures, people would say, in their approach to try to contain it. So quarantining the population. We had temperature checks, which I still have at my apartment everywhere. We weren't allowed to open our business until we had a safety inspector come to our facility, and that was throughout all of China. And then they ramped up industrial testing. So they were able to test very large portions of the population and isolate those people with coronavirus. And one thing in addition, I left China for a few weeks and I came back, and they actually require a mandatory 14-day quarantine at my house with 2 coronavirus tests. So one on the 10th day and one on the 14th. So that's just to give listeners kind of some of the measures that they're taking here. And in relative terms, as of now, we see very few cases. We see some small spread of a few hundred people in the north now in China. But in terms of like business and things opening and people out going to restaurants and things operating, at least in Shenzhen where we are, which is the border city to Hong Kong, we have no new cases for a month or two. And so things are relatively normal in terms of daily life and the ability to manufacture and ship things out of China. But that was not the case when it was at the height of the virus, which was January and February.
And what happened then? I mean, everybody was just on quarantine. Was everybody on edge? Was it very hard to distribute anything? To get anything out of the warehouse, move it along the line, to cross the border, et cetera?
Yeah, it was really tough. Actually, at that time, at the end of January was China's Chinese New Year, which would be similar to our holidays at the end of December. And basically, they decided to extend the holiday because they wanted people to not really move around the country. So a 1-week holiday turned into a 2-week holiday. And then after the Chinese New Year, factories tried to get back online. That's in February. And what we saw is that since there were new health regulations and a health inspector needed to go to each factory to allow them to open, we saw a lot of delays in the ability of factories to actually be able to start manufacturing. And we didn't really see manufacturing get back online until March. And then April, we kind of saw full capacity come back into manufacturing. And by full capacity, I mean most factories could do 80 to 100% of their previous capacity. So that's what we saw on the manufacturing side. On the actual air freight side, we saw that since most of the passenger flights around the world were canceled, a lot of people don't realize that 50% of air freight is actually shipped in the belly of passenger flights. So we saw a massive supply constraint in terms of the amount of air freight capacity available. And then with all the personal protection equipment that hospitals needed, we saw a massive demand in the need for air freight. And so air freight prices in February and March actually doubled and tripled globally. So those were like 2 of the biggest influences on the supply chain in terms of manufacturing and shipping during the virus.
So I have to ask, it might be a personal-ish question, but I mean, do you believe that China had a direct involvement with the spread of the coronavirus to the U.S. on purpose? Like, do you believe that, because with what you're saying, they basically they knew if that was the case, they would have known that this was going to constrain their supply. It was going to make it so that their e-commerce was not going to be able to function as it should, because everybody's trying to, not get sick. So do you believe that was a major, they were a major, not impact, but a major contributor to the spread to the U.S.? I mean, do you feel like
Yes.
that?
So I think everyone does know that it originated in China. So that's for sure. The way in which it was originated, I don't know. I wish I did know. I think there's a few things to note. One is the speed at which the virus spreads. So we did see China take the most. So China often does extreme things, right? And one is the way in which they shut down their economy. And I think that's something to note, because if the country decides to shut down the whole thing, it's got to be serious, right? And so I think that was one of the signals to know that like this thing is actually serious and it's like really, really dangerous. And there was also one thing that was interesting that I like to note to the listeners is there was a doctor. He was called Li Wenliang, and he was actually not promoting, but basically bringing this virus to light in Wuhan. And he was actually silenced by a lot of the authorities in the beginning. And he was made to sign an actual agreement that he wouldn't spread rumors. And this was at the beginning when the government was trying to, let's say, kind of have a hold on some of the information that was being spread. And he actually died of the virus. He became kind of a hero in terms of his interest in telling people about this thing, because in the beginning the government was kind of trying, from what we saw, to try to cover it up a bit. And so this actually spread on social media, which is not normal because China usually censors it. So it was kind of an interesting case that I've never seen in China, where people had this very strong response to kind of a whistleblower that didn't get stopped by the Chinese censors. So was there with information withheld? It seems so. How much? I have no idea. but yeah. So I would say it did start. I think there was some information withheld. How much of it was, I'm not sure. But definitely the virus was spreading around the world, I would say, way earlier than anyone knew. And not just to the U.S., everywhere,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Everywhere,
So,
right?
Yeah.
Anywhere that people were traveling in and out of China, out of Wuhan, anywhere, right? They're gonna contaminate wherever they go, because if they contracted it and then didn't know they had it for a few days, traveled to another country, and now all of a sudden they told everybody, I could see how it could spread very quickly.
Just quick, just so what listeners know, Wuhan is kind of a very central area in China, and it's kind of a big, actually, transportation hub within China. And so I think that fueled, just the fact of its location and its importance in transportation, that probably fueled the speed in which that it spread as well.
So one last thing, and then we'll kind of get on to more of the business side of things, but how is it being an American in China? I want to know for my personal thoughts. I'm sure the listeners want to know as well. American in China right now, what is that like?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, overall, like just doing business is fine in general, just because, business is a more black and white type of thing. People try to take politics and things like that out of business. But I would say overall, to be honest, I've been in China for the past 10 years, and being a foreigner, not just an American, but an outsider in China, has become less and less, I'd say China is less and less welcoming in terms of the ability to live here. And I would notice that there's a bit of tension, whether it's not verbalized, but maybe you can kind of feel it in the air, if you can kind of understand that. And a lot of my friends that have lived here for many years, 5 or 10 years, a lot of them are leaving. And so I think that's an interesting data point to see that, you know, people feel less comfortable here. And so there is tension, it's increasing, and it's not as easy to be a foreigner living here as it was before, I would say.
I mean, that only really makes sense, to be honest. You know, if it was very welcoming and they were like, "Oh yeah, come on in," you know, they made you feel great, I'd be a little weirded out by that, just because that doesn't seem like the right move right now. But
Yeah.
anyways, let's get back to, you know, Easy China Warehouse, because I want to know more about the number side of things. Obviously, this is an investment podcast. It talks about business. We talk about how business works. Logistics is an interesting business because the middleman always the middleman always does very well. And as a logistics provider, that's who you are, right? I'm a middleman in real estate transactions on a lot of transactions that I do. And that's what I like to connect the dots that way. Same thing goes with you. So let's talk about the numbers a little bit with what it is that you do with Easy China Warehouse, so that you can kind of explain, you know, what do you offer? How does it make money? You know, where are the big money makers for you? Because I'm interested to understand that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll tell you the thought process of why I, as a previous e-commerce owner, wanted to start an e-commerce logistics company. And in selling your own product, there's a lot of challenges. I sell Bluetooth speakers. You have to design a product. So there's time to design the product, right? You have to buy inventory. So you have to take up a lot of cash to buy X amount of inventory, and then you have to bring it to the US or whatever country you sell in, and then try to sell it to people, right? And so there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and it's a very timely process to scale a business like that, because you have so many limitations in the ability to manufacture and the ability of your just actual cash to buy more inventory for more products. And so it's a challenging business. And so if you look at Amazon's model, Amazon's model is to be a toll booth, right?
Yep.
They have warehouses everywhere. They build the infrastructure. And every single product that someone buys, they take a cut of it. Okay. So that's what I wanted to do before the product gets to Amazon. Okay. And that's why I chose to do this type of business. I don't have to develop product, meaning I don't have to spend all the time to do it. I don't have to sell the product. And I don't have the cash outlay that I need to hold inventory. So it's much more scalable, right? I can rent a warehouse, and every product that goes through that warehouse, we make some type of money on the product. And how do we make money? So the basics is, the first is just storage, right? I have space in my warehouse. I charge people to store their product in my warehouse X amount of percent more than my actual cost, right? So that keeps like my facility paid for, essentially. And then the second way that we don't really make much money on storage, but it covers our like base costs of the operation. And then the second way that we make money is shipments. So we make margin on everything that's shipped. So if I ship like something that costs $10 to ship, I might make $1 or two on that shipment, right?
Are you doing ground shipments, like LTL shipments, or are you doing full truckload stuff, or are you only doing air freight?
Yeah,
Sea?
we do air freight, so full air freight. We do sea freight. We don't really do LTL because it's all international, so we ship by sea on boats. And then we do small packet, and that would be like an individual product. So basically, on the small packet shipments, we charge a pick and pack fee that most warehouses would charge, and we make margin on that operation, right? And then we would make margin on the actual shipping costs. So whatever we charge our customers to ship, we, as you know, since we have volume, we get discounts from a lot of the carriers, and we take that discount, we pass some of the discount onto our customer, and then some of it is margin for us. So
Absolutely.
that's how like kind of the business makes money. And then in terms of heavy freight, we consolidate products in containers, and we make money on that consolidation because we charge more than it would cost for someone to fill a full container, because we do that consolidation, right? And then we make money on the actual shipment fee, the cost of transportation. So those are like our main drivers of income.
Okay, and you can make so on so let's say one product, right? You can have several points where you're going to make a piece of that product, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the competitive advantage for somebody in your industry where, like, why would somebody choose you over somebody else? Is it price? Are you able to give a lower price or a better, is it a better service? I mean, and I don't know if that gives away your secret or not, but
No, it's okay.
you know, what is a competitive advantage for somebody in the logistics field that you are in? You know, why
Sure.
would
Yeah.
somebody do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, traditionally, like people that would sell in the U.S., they would manufacture in China, and then they would fill up a container, and then they would take that whole container and send it to the U.S. to a 3PL there, and that 3PL would help them kind of distribute their products. Now, the thing is, for e-commerce sellers, e-commerce has become a much more global marketplace. And
Absolutely.
what I mean is, like, you can sell anywhere, right? You just need a website, and you need a good sales copy and a good website, and drive traffic to it, and you can sell your products anywhere.
Yep.
And so what we're finding is a lot of sellers are not just selling in the US, they're selling in Japan, they're selling in Europe, they're selling, in all these other places. And so instead of taking, let's say, a whole container, sending it to the US, and then realizing you need inventory in Japan, and then taking that same product and shipping it all the way back to Japan, it makes more sense if you're a global seller to actually leave your products in China and then distribute to those marketplaces as you need more inventory. And so that's kind of one of the key advantages of us is flexibility for global sellers. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, like, okay, originally you used to only sell in the US, but now you have, 30 orders a day in South America, and you have 20 orders a day in Asia. So that could be Vietnam, Thailand, Japan. And instead of, like, fulfilling directly from the US, it's usually cheaper if you're going to fulfill to Asia or some other countries to leave it in China and to ship to those countries from China. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the advantage is the people that are more globalized in their sales. They're finding more flexibility by leaving it in China and distributing it as they need to those applicable marketplaces.
That's actually, I mean, that's a great way to probably drive down costs too for that manufacturer,
Correct.
for that company, right? Because they don't have all the moving parts or the different places they have to ship to in order to get it to the end consumer. Now,
Exactly.
are there certain areas that are your, like, target hotspots? Just as an example, like Japan. Is Japan somewhere that or is it spread out? You have a lot of stuff that goes everywhere, or are there certain, like, hubs, I should say, maybe, where that you see it's like a great connector for other parts of the world. So if you're going to go to Japan, that's a great hub to go to other, I guess, South American countries, or, does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say overall, like, in terms of, like, markets that people focus on, we generally have a lot more American customers because I'm American, and we tend to have, like, more, or let's say, Western country customers that serve English speaking countries. So our main market is still the US in terms of the amount of volume that we ship, but we see people that are native English speakers, they tend to sell to those English speaking countries. So a lot of our volume goes to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Europe, including Japan. And so I would say a lot of it has to do with, like, who you relate to, but also who has spending power as well. So we also see Western, more developed countries, e-commerce sellers generally focus on those countries because those people have money
Yep.
and they're willing to spend money. So that would be like North America, also, the countries I said, plus Europe and Japan is like the main markets that we focus on. And we see much smaller volume from underdeveloped countries.
So, and I mean, would that also make that makes sense? You're gonna sell where you're culturally bound to, right? So somebody
Correct. Yeah.
speaking is gonna have a culture barrier or culture connection with somebody else who speaks English. Somebody that's so you're in China. I'm guessing you lived there 10 years. You speak Chinese now, right?
Yeah, I do know. Yeah.
Okay. And did you before you got there, or did you learn it when you were there?
Yeah, I couldn't speak a word of Chinese before I arrived. So it was all living and working here. And that's what gives us a bit of an advantage in terms of being a logistics provider for e-commerce companies here is we speak English well. We understand that culture and the Western culture. We understand the Chinese market. And also I was an e-commerce seller as well. So I feel like and if you know what your customers need because you are one of the customers of your own of your own service, then you can really add a lot of value because you can create solutions that a lot of other people aren't thinking of. And I think that's like one of our big advantages here in China. Yes, there's other people that do what we do, but they don't know the e-commerce market as well as we do.
So, and maybe this is a dumb question. It very well may be, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Because do you find it to be, because you have that advantage of knowing what you're the consumer for what it is that you're selling, does that give you a big competitive advantage over somebody else that doesn't have that? You know, I mean, being an entrepreneur is tough. It doesn't matter what industry or what business you're in. Every entrepreneurial venture is a tough venture. However, with what you just said, does that make it easier for you? Was it, you know, when you got in and you started, I mean, have you always had that entrepreneurial spirit, or did you find a, you know, an opportunity, saw a hole in the marketplace that you could fill?
I think a little bit of both. I saw the hole, and as someone that saw the opportunity and saw what other people were doing. So I was shipping with other people in the beginning. And when I would talk to their salespeople, they had no idea how the platforms work. And by platforms, I mean the e-commerce platforms like Shopify, like Amazon, and all this stuff. They were just selling shipping. And so if you have salespeople that actually don't know their customer and don't know their customer's need, I just saw that like I would talk to them about issues that I was having in regards to shipping with them because of what Amazon was telling me, and they didn't understand. And so I figured like if we could provide, you know, similar service, but actually understand and provide answers to our customers of why this is happening and solutions, then we'll be way ahead of everyone else. And that's where I saw kind of the opportunity and our knowledge or my knowledge fit. And that's where we created those services. So I still think we have an advantage because we still know a lot more than the people that are selling these services on the ground in China.
And how big is the operation? I mean, is it you and then you got a full staff of people, or do you not?
Yeah, we have a full staff. Yeah, we have a full staff of people, and they're all Chinese. So I'm kind of the manager of the company, and all the people below, whether it be the warehouse operators, customer service, and all those guys are all Chinese. Yep.
Okay, very interesting. I wonder, the whole e-commerce side of things within China. I mean, I would just think that it would be, you know, where do you see it going? Do you see it
Yeah.
getting bigger, or do you see it getting worse off? I mean, as we have tensions between the two countries and continents, really, I mean, because you have to look at the whole continent. Do you find that your opportunity to grow is there, or do you find that you're going to possibly see some complications in the upcoming future that may limit your growth?
Yeah, I would say in terms of just straight, like not buying from China, but just e-commerce in general, I think the coronavirus has actually accelerated people's adoptions of buying online, right?
Oh yeah,
Maybe your parents didn't have an account before, an online buying account, and now they're buying everything online, right? And so it kind of pushed that trend that was already happening. So in terms of e-commerce, it's been great for anyone in this industry. So for us as well. In terms of manufacturing in China, what I tell people very often is that I, it, manufacturing might leave China, but I think it's unlikely to go back to the U.S. I think if it does leave China, I think it will go to another low-cost competitor. And we all know the low-cost competitors to China. That would be like India, Southeast Asia, so countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Bangladesh. Just because the U.S. system is actually not really set up to bring manufacturing back unless there's rules and laws that force that transfer back.
right.
And also at the same time, supply chains are complicated. So to move a whole supply chain back to the U.S. or close, it takes a lot of time. So even if that were to happen, there need to be a lot of planning, and this would take 5 or 10 years. So I still think even though, China might not be the center in the future because there are companies diversifying outside of China, that it still will be an important place to manufacture in the next 5 years. After that, I don't know.
You know,
But
crystal ball.
Yeah, the infrastructures here in terms of the actual manufacturing facilities, the ports, so the transportation globally, and then the internet infrastructure. So you have websites like Alibaba that makes it very easy to find factories. So you need to find them, then you need to manufacture, and then you need to transport them. And China still has that advantage.
So, and yeah, that certainly makes sense. One last question before I think we go into a lightning round, and that is competition, right? So you'd mentioned Amazon. Okay, this is the behemoth in the room. This is the one that has, you know, Amazon lost money for 10 years plus before they became profitable, right? And
Yeah.
now they come on the scene as this massive, untouchable, almost untouchable competitor for you. Are they a competitor, or have you been able to align yourself with them?
Yeah, so they're a competitor in a way, but they're also a partner.
Yep.
So um, we help companies ship their product into Amazon. So that's how I would call it a partner. So part of our business is actually facilitating shipments into Amazon for e-commerce companies. So the fact that Amazon exists help us in that respect. Now we also do direct from China fulfillment, and the direct fulfillment, Amazon is a competitor to that type of product, right? And so both they're they're a friend and an enemy, I guess you could say. But I think their size and their strength in the market, you have to find a way to like kind of work with them or to provide a service that complements Amazon, because I don't think you can, any size company, it's hard to beat them. So it's more about joining them and finding an opportunity to make money in terms of working with their platform.
You know, it's funny. I'm gonna make a parallel here that I think the listeners might appreciate, and I parallel that with the U.S. government in the sense that every American, anybody who, well, and probably in any country, but if you're an American, you pay taxes, okay? And some people look at taxes as terrible. They take your taxes. You know, the IRS is your worst enemy.
Right.
Well, the wealthy, the rich out there actually know that the IRS and the U.S. government is your best partner because I mean, if you're on one side or the other of the tax code, you're either the one that's paying them lots of money, or you understand how the tax code is written. Therefore, you understand that the majority of the tax code is written on how you save money. And so, as long as you can understand that, now all of a sudden it changes your perspective on how you look at taxes. And
Hmm.
so that's just an interesting parallel that I see there. Very
Yeah, the big people in the room, you probably have to, even if you don't like them, you probably have to deal with them, right? So you got to find the best way that you can work in that scenario.
Absolutely, absolutely, Brian. You know, it's been very interesting, and I'm glad that you came on the show today. I think your perspective on the coronavirus, a little education for the listeners about what happened in China, and what the measures they took. Explaining a little bit about what third party logistics is and how you incorporate yourself into the marketplace, I think is super interesting, and I'm excited we got a chance to meet today. But are you ready for a lightning round?
Sure.
All right,
I'm a little nervous, but let's do it.
no, it's pretty simple. I'll go light on you. So, first question is, how do you feel your mindset? How important is your mindset on the success of not only your business but also your life?
Yeah, I think my mindset in my business affects my life. So if I have a good mindset and things are going well in the business, my happiness and my enjoyment outside of work is improved. And so I think fixing the business or fixing my mentality there helps me fix my overall mentality in life in general, right?
Amen. Yeah, amen to that for sure. What is the last book that you read? What are you reading right now?
Oh, what is the last book I read? I'm reading right now Ray Dalio's book on debt crises. So
Okay.
just based on what the government has done to give a lot of money in terms of the Fed coming in and also them providing additional benefits, I see that there's going to be more debt that we have to service, and I'm just trying to learn how that works, right? So yeah, and so I feel like Ray Dalio as a kind of is one of the most prominent people in the investment community, and just learning what he writes about debt crises, I think will help me understand the global market and also what the Fed is doing, which is unprecedented in terms of the monetary policy that we're doing now. So I'm just trying to get my head around it. And that's where I've started, is Ray Dalio.
That's probably the best spot to start when this whole pandemic started. I watched an hour and a half long interview that he had where he was kind of talking about that. And those of you that are listening to the show, I'm sure you know who Ray Dalio is. He is the CEO and founder of Bridgewater and Associates, which is a massive hedge fund. And he's very, very smart guy
Yep.
when it comes to finance.
Yeah.
Anyways, he very complicated at the same time. I love Ray Dalio. I think he has another book called Principles. I don't know if you have a chance to read that, but that has a lot of great points on just good business, how to operate good business. So anyways, Thank you for sharing that. What are you currently trying to learn right now in this whole pandemic and, living in China as an American and whatever? What specifically are you trying to learn?
We're trying to, I guess the big thing for us is to provide, one is improve processes in our warehouse. So that's very focused on us, right? The more efficient we are, the better service we can provide, the more value we can bring to our customers. And then the second is just how do we do better outreach and get information about what we do into more people that are doing this type of business. So that's, and the last thing is we're growing. So we're starting to hire people. And for me, like, learning how to manage people is way more difficult than I ever thought. And it's a huge challenge. So learning management and how to manage people is way more difficult than people think. And that's the biggest thing I'm focusing on: how to be a good leader in terms of building a company that people feel good about and they do a good job, basically.
Yeah, leadership is an ongoing skill that continues to evolve over time, and you can't get it right, man. It's continual, that's for sure.
Right, forever learning. Yeah.
What is your superpower? If you have one, if you had to name one, what would it be?
I think my superpower is I am relentless to find a solution to something. I know that there's tons of problems in my business or in my life, and I'll always figure it out. Regardless of how long it takes, I will basically hammer that problem until I solve it. And I think that's my superpower. I will be relentless in fixing a problem, even if I don't understand it. I'll learn it, I'll fix it, and then I will teach my employees how to do that in the future. So that's definitely my superpower.
What, Brian? That is one component of a great leader right there. Somebody that is relentless on figuring out the solutions to the problems out there. Because, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There are more problems than you're always going to run into problems. I mean, I can't even think about the problems you've had to overcome, the adversity you've had to overcome, being in your spot in a foreign place doing a tough business, to be honest. So,
right. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Last question is, where can the listeners reach you? Obviously, we talked about a lot of stuff. If they want to know more about it, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So they can go to our website. It's easychinawarehouse.com. Okay. Or if they have any questions about China, not just logistics, just sourcing, manufacturing, anything, they can send me an email directly, brian@easychinawarehouse.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include that in the show notes. And Brian, man, it has been phenomenal to talk to you today. I'm glad we got to meet each other, even though you're on the other side of the world right now.
Yep.
It is almost 6 p.m. here in Arizona, and it is what time there in China?
Almost 9 a.m. here.
Oh, yep. That's phenomenal. That's just crazy. So thank you for being here once again. And the listeners that have stuck with us up to this point, I want to thank you for doing that. This is how, we enjoy to give content like this. And if you did get something out of this, make sure to like it and share it with all your friends so we can make sure to make their life a little bit better as well. And Brian, we'll make sure to keep in touch with you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, man. Talk to you real soon.
Yep. See ya. Yeah.